All right, ladies and gentlemen, from that exciting session, we got to know what are the skills that really matter in the industry. So, to utilize the skills that matter in the industry, we have to get into the industry first. So, for that, we have to create an effective resume and then tackle an interview. But how do we do that? Don't worry if you don't know it, because we've got you covered again with our next speaker, Mr. Omar Rajarathnam, who is the manager for Sri Lanka at International Media Support, IMS, and he's a lecturer at Sri Lanka Technological Campus. So he will tell us all the tips for an effective resume and winning an interview. So hang on tight and listen carefully, because we are sure that this is going to be super crucial for your next interviews and your next resumes. So Mr. Omar Rajarathnam, good evening. We are excited to have you guys here, and the screen is yours.
Good evening, Trividya. Thank you for that very kind introduction. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sir. You are perfectly audible.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, I am going to share the screen here, and then we'll probably also get started. Everyone can see my screen?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Excellent. Thank you. So, right. So good evening, everyone. We have about 92 participants, probably including the organizing committee as well. It's really nice to have all of you gather here unfortunately virtually today, but then, like very soon, probably in the near future in person as well. So this session, in fact, is, I was listening to also Dr. Dharmavansa, and who spoke about hard and soft skills and balancing them. So this probably gives me also a very good launch pad into what we want to kind of talk about, which is writing an effective resume and how to foster effective skills to face interviews. Basically, what we look at is what is the correct balance in doing so today. But before that, I want to kind of pose a question to everybody who's here. And you can either unmute your mic and say, give us the answer, or you can also kind of put it on chat. But I'd like an answer in any case. How many of you use motivational quotes that you see on social media on your resume or your curriculum bit? How many of you do that? How many of you use motivational quotes that you see on social media on your resume? If it's a no, it's a no. But if it's a yes. Okay. No answers. Okay. Right. I'm going to kind of try and looking to move on anyway, because we've not had any answers. Well, that could be one of the don'ts. Oh, hold on. I will actually see. There is one. So, there are folk who use motivational quotes that they see on social media on their resume. Unfortunately, though, that would be one of the don'ts. In our next slide that we're kind of going to see, we'll start off the presentation on tips for an effective resume, but what not to do in doing so, right? Number one would be not to make your CV, your resume, more than 3 pages long. Now, why do we say that? Ideally, you'd probably see in a lot of Google tips on writing an effective resume, they say don't go more than 2 pages. But especially in the tech industry and so on, with a lot of stuff that you have to, with some people having so much of experiences to do, we're probably okay to just go over. Oh, okay, right. Sorry. Right. So, can you see that now? Yeah. Hold on. Yeah. Okay, 4. Right. Okay, there was a request to share my screen as a slideshow, so I've done it. Apologies, it was not done before. So in the tech industry, in fact, what we also kind of think is if there is a lot for you to write, perhaps it can exceed 2 pages. It is obviously going to exceed 2 pages. That is still okay. Don't worry too much about it. But don't now start writing resumes that probably are going to run into about 4 to 5 pages, because really, when you do draft resumes, you are trying to represent you. You're trying to give a very good pitch of you, but you have to be able to pitch yourself in a very, very, very short and concise manner as well. So number 1, in the don't exceed 3 pages. Number 2, and for some of you who kindly responded on the chat, that you do use motivational quotes that you see on social media on your resume. There is really no need to do that, because often we find on social media where motivational quotes are attributed to the wrong person. Sometimes there are motivational quotes that are attributed to Buddha, which actually kind of speaks about modern day tech sometimes, which is really not the case. There is some stuff that are probably, because as rich as people, you'd probably see motivational quotes attributed to Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg over some things that they have not even said. So be very careful about using motivational quotes that you see on social media, on your resume, or even at your interview, because most often they really didn't even say that. I've also sometimes seen examples, they probably attributed, when I say attributed, they actually say that a motivational quote was mentioned by an actor when the actor hasn't even said so. So be very careful about using a motivational quote. Another don't is, try not to squeeze in all what you've done in school, all what you've done at work, all what you've done at, your extracurricular activities sometimes, because as you go, see, if it's your first CV, it's okay to put a lot of extracurricular activities that you've done in school or you've done in your community clubs and so on. But as you go up the ladder, and if you're probably getting to mid-levels, or you're probably in your 3rd year of your career and you're trying to apply for a new job, you don't need to go into way too much detail about what you did in school as an extracurricular activity, because your work itself is going to speak for itself and the skills and competencies that you. Another don't would really be to use too many, not to use too many pictures or tables or graphics or animations on your CV, because you only have 3 pages, and sometimes these graphics or animations or effects, in fact, could take a lot of the space, or the pictures and tables and the graphs that you want to put in could really take a lot of your space. So one recommendation is you really don't need to include it if you are able to say what you want to say within the 3 pages or 2 pages. Number 5 would be on the don'ts is you don't need to include your gender, age, your ethnicity, or your marital status on your CV. This is something that we actually see in a lot of Sri Lankan resumes. Applicants think that it is important to include your gender. It's important to tell how old you are. It is important to tell whether you're married or not. It's important to say whether you're Tamil, Sinhalese, Muslim, Christian. It's really not needed, because it takes up about 4 lines of your curriculum, of your resume, that you actually can use to start speaking about some of the skills that you have, or your competencies, or something that you've done at work. Another don't would really be not to forget including a cover letter or referees on your resume if the job application has requested for it. It is something that you have to do. Not every job or needs a cover letter, not every job needs a referee. Some jobs would also say that your referees could be provided upon request. If that is what they've said, you don't need to really go ahead and include it. Be very careful about it, because why we also say it is because in terms of getting referees, you have to contact people. You have to actually get their contact. These things can be time consuming. In a cover letter, again, if you want to write it, that is also something that is time consuming. You can avoid it if the job has not requested for you to do that. But if it has requested it, then you're going to have to spend some time to draft them. Another don't in putting together an effective resume could be to use jargon. Of course, especially in tech, a lot of the things are either, there is a lot of acronyms and a lot of abbreviations. When we say that itself could be jargon sometimes. Don't forget that sometimes as you apply for large organizations, right, there is somebody in HR or human resources who's going to do the initial screening of. And sometimes if they don't understand jargon, on your technical side or the technological side, which can be the case because not everybody who gets recruited into the human resource section of even big IT firms know exactly what the technical side of the operation is. If you start using jargon and they don't understand as they read you, they don't even know whether, they find it difficult to kind of, go through that screen. So don't make it hard on anybody who is reviewing an application or your job application to be able to proceed or shortlist you for an application. Don't exaggerate. Don't say things, don't really make little things look like big, or really make minor matters look like big stuff. You can be very specific, straightforward. That's exactly how you can kind of go ahead. On a resume, the other thing is don't lie. Don't ever lie. That could always come to bite you back, because you don't need to lie. You don't need to be irrelevant, because a resume is always a representation of you. It's a representation of your identity as somebody who's, when I say identity, not your ethnic or social identity, but your work identity. You have got to always be able to present that. Now, in that also one thing in don't that well, maybe I will actually go on to the do's and before I kind of, anybody has any questions so far? You can unmute the mic and tell me if you have any questions, or you can even put it on chat. So tips of an effective resume. For an effective resume, what you in fact can do, right? Number one, always, and this is something that you have to always do, customize your resume for each job, right? Because you could almost always be certain that every company that puts the job out, sometimes similar roles, they'd have like different requirements. They probably will also structure their requirements in a way. Always try to mirror your resume with a job applications sequence. So that would kind of, help you structure your resume all the time. When you customize it, you also are looking at structuring. So don't ever have like a standard CV or a resume that you're sending to every job that comes your way. It really doesn't give you an edge, because people, not to forget, right, the ones who are screening it are always having the job will always have the job application in front of them, or the people who are screening it are the ones who have written the job application. So they are used to looking at it, or they know exactly what they want and how they sequence the job application. So for the resume to be something that really doesn't take that into account, the person who's screening is already almost disconnected with what you're kind of saying, or they are also confused. You can really easily avoid that by customizing your resume according to the sequence, as in number 1, 2, 3 on the job application, right? Number 2, there are a few ways to do a resume, right? There is there is something called a chronological CV. There is a functional CV. A chronological CV could actually be like something that you say where you worked first, where you worked second, where you worked third. It could also be where you put where you worked third, where you worked second, where you worked first. Some CVs you can also go by functional roles, or what you've actually done in places, right? So the recommendation would be always put right after your bio or your personal statements, job-related experience right on top. If you're applying for a job, it is only right that the people who are screening it would like to see what you have done in terms of work and your academic skills that will fit that job. if you've done a job that is not related to this role, but you also have done a role that is related to the role that you're applying, always put the role that you have that relates to this role right on top. Now, if you have not done anything in relation to this role and you want to apply for a new role to learn on the job, that's fine. Then you can actually put whatever job that you want. But if you have anything that is related to the job, always put that on top, right? Number 3, always use words like on things that you've achieved, things that you've done, and always use active words. You've either done stuff, you say you supervised it, you say you achieved this, you said you delivered this, you say you coordinated this, you say you co-authored this, you say that I mean, sometimes people also say I assisted, right? I assisted with a project. More than assisted, you could actually kind of also be using things like, you partnered in the project, or you can actually say that you supported the project. So you always look at very concrete words to use in your resume without saying I helped out with this or I assisted with this, because sometimes assisting with something could also be pretty vague. Always, when you are trying to put out things that you have done, use words that are concrete and are very measurable. That's exactly it, right? On resumes, again, the do's, don't think using different fonts in different styles, different colors is going to really make the CV a lot more attractive. The better thing for you to do is use same fonts, but in different sizes. So the entire resume really has one type of font, but in different sizes if you want to differentiate it like that. Space it out also in a very uniform manner, because that is also very easy on the eye for somebody who's reading. Including a bio or like a personal statement or like a summary of your skills right on top. Always try to make it about 3 sentences or four sentences. You don't have to use words like self-motivated or like, energetic or enthusiastic and things like that, because these are words now about 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when these words were introduced into being included in a CV, it was very catchy to use these words. But today, in today's day and age, you really don't need to tell somebody whether you're self-motivated or you're enthusiastic about life. You could actually be non-enthusiastic about life and work, but still be good at the job. So only focus on what you bring to the table, the competencies that you have. You don't actually have to say that you're a self-motivated or an energetic or an enthusiastic person if you're really not. At work, you can also be somebody who's not too enthusiastic about being around people. But if you're still good at your job, you can actually end up getting the job. But of course, I don't mean to kind of go contradict what Dr. Dharmavansu was talking about in his presentation about networking skills. Networking is important. You have to kind of do it. But networking is also different to being very energetic on the role or the job, or being happy all the time at work. That's really not needed. So you don't have to use words that are not you. Use words that don't represent your true self in your CV, in your resume, right? Another thing is to be very specific on your resume all the time. Always say things that are measurable. Always say things that you've done. Always try and say things in 1 or 2 lines. But also the other thing is try and back up whatever that you've said. When you're specific, back up that with something that you've actually done. Always include what you've done when you're being specific as well. Another important one, in fact, is to be able to include an email and phone details. I think a lot of us sometimes by templates, we go and include an address. Sometimes we'll include an email only and not a phone number. The recommendation is to include both, because when you do that, if the email fails, they can call you. If the phone fails, they can email you. That way you have like a backup that they can keep you in touch. Now, the most important one is, in fact, when you email a CV, check whether you've had an acknowledgement. Most of the firms now would automate a response and say, we're happy to have received your application, we'll get back to you. That means that they have received it. You have that acknowledgement, save that acknowledgement. if you've not seen an acknowledgement for something that you've applied, always follow up. It is okay to follow up because it shows initiative, right? Another do that I've actually not that I haven't mentioned here, because there's also not enough space to mention everything that we need. In a resume, it's very important to represent or bring really the best representation of what you are, your skills and competencies, right? And we have to also admit that we are not all native English speakers if we are doing a resume in English, right? If it is that, that's fine. First, write your resume in a language that you are comfortable. Put that out there. And then look at, once you've done it, you can probably look at translating it on your own. You can look at translating it with somebody else. But make that CV something that you believe. Make that CV something that you can endorse as something that represents you and your skills and your competencies in the most accurate and the truest manner, right? Any questions on that? Any questions on the do's on the resumes? If you have anything you think I've missed out, anything that you've heard somewhere else, this is your time. We can go through that. You can either unmute your mics, or you can also put it on message whether we are okay to move to the next slide. All okay? And you can drop a message if you are clear or you're not clear, and we're happy to go through it again. Right, I don't seem to have received any message. Yeah, it says okay. Thank you. Okay. Right, cool. I've received some messages saying it. Okay, so we're moving on to the next one, right? Which is now after the resume is being submitted, what's the next thing that you look for? Obviously, you're waiting for a call for the interview, and then you want to go for that. You want to do well at the interview as well, right? So let's see how that is done. In interviews, we have a few do's. Now, when it came to resumes, we first looked at don'ts, and then we looked at the do's. In interviews, I look at the do's first, because let's start with the positives. Why not? And then we'll go on to what we shouldn't be doing. Almost always, try and set aside at least 5 minutes to know about the company, their background, what exactly they do ahead of the interview. Now, in this day and age, especially being tech students, there is no excuse not to kind of, do this, because you have your tablets, your iPads, your laptops, your phones, and whatnot. If you're really tech savvy, you should be able to at least Google the company's name up. Look at multiple references, look at multiple sources, look at about 1 or 2 articles, and learn something about the company, right? It is a must. If you haven't learned anything about the company ahead of the interview, don't lie if they ask you if they know about the company. Don't say that you know about it. But we'll look at that at don'ts, right? But learn about the company for sure. It'll do you a lot of good. It'll really make you feel calmer at the interview. It'll make the interview panel also feel like you are somebody who takes initiative, right? Dress neatly for an interview. It's okay. When we say dress neatly, be clean. I always say this, there is no need to dress in an expensive manner. You are not there at an interview to look expensive. You are there to kind of look knowledgeable and able to do something, or capable. You really are not there to look expensive, but dress neatly, right? Turn up at least 10 minutes early. I know back in the day, some people say turn up as early as you can. Don't do that these days, because most of the companies these days, they operate in smaller offices. They operate in co-working spaces, which are also small. If you turn up half an hour before, they're probably not going to be able to accommodate you to even make you sit somewhere until the interview starts. and chances are you might actually end up like, standing out in the sun until their time to call you. And you don't want to do that because in the heat, you're wearing a tie, you're dressed up well or anything like that. You don't want to be, drying up in the heat outside or soaking up in the sun. Always only turn up about 10 minutes earlier. Just definitely not earlier than that because it is really not required, no matter what. When you get to the interview location, always tell the interview secretary or the person who's coordinated that you are there. That way they know exactly that that you're there, and they also know where to find you. Right. Okay, there is also a request to see if we can get those slides. Yes, you can get the slides. I will forward this to Imesh and the team after this finishes, so you can kind of go ahead. I'm going to also make it quick because apparently I'm a bit out of time. Right. Greet everyone in the room, in an interview room. Always do that because if it's a panel, you have to actually meet everybody in the panel. Shake hands with people if you're offered. And in these times of COVID, always sanitize your hands before and after. Look people in the eye when they're actually talking to you. Be very straightforward in your answers. Always carry a pen if you're nervous, right? So I'm going to actually use this. Even if you're talking at an interview and you feel kind of nervous, it's okay to just carry a pen all the time. I'm just going to show you that. You can answer like this, right? Don't always use your fingers and like, make it look like you're doing this or you're doing that, because it makes you look very, very nervous. It's a bit unnecessary for you to be there. Pivoting, I've actually included it here and bolded it out because pivoting is always coming back to some key points that you know about yourself, or any point that you actually know is going to pitch you really well at an interview. So the tip is mark like your best 5 skills and competencies before you go to an interview. And always try and pivot back to those points, no matter what the question is. You master it well, you're going to be able to do that. Come back to always amplify or start talking about those 5 skills and competencies, despite the question that they actually have asked, right? In the do's, another one, you can ask about job and pay. The job roles, when they ask you, do you have any questions for us? Always ask about what this job entails. Ask about the salary that you can expect, because most advertisements would say the salary is negotiable, and that's kind of, it. So you can actually ask. You can take up responsibilities that you're unfamiliar with, but say that you are unfamiliar with it and that you're willing to learn on the job. Don't say that, but we'll get to the don'ts in a bit, but feel free to take up responsibilities that you're unfamiliar with, because you can learn on the job, but admit at the interview that you will learn on the job, right? Another huge interview tip that is to provide is be polite to everyone from the guard room up, right? Because sometimes the chain works in such a way, you could actually be the best interviewee, but if you've been rude to the guard room or security guard outside, that can actually come up. In fact, I interview, that's one of the things that I actually do. If I have the opportunity, I go and kind of start talking about people who've met them on the way. Because that actually shows what kind of person you actually are, that you didn't come into the interview and started to pretend, because these are people who are going to give you the job, but you also kind of were very rude to somebody who's at the guard room who you know are going to be or going to do a role that is below you, right? I'm going to move on to the don'ts immediately because I think the big don't would be one thing. If you lose a job for being truthful, that's fine. Just don't lie, because you're going to get caught out eventually, right? If you don't understand a question that the interviewer has asked you, don't assume that you understood it. Feel free don't feel scared to kind of ask the interviewer to repeat the question, right? Number 3, don't be late. Try not to be late, but if you're late, always inform lateness. Tell them that you are going to be late and apologize. This shows that you're not afraid of setbacks, right? This is so much better than turning up for an interview uninformed but late and actually saying something like a traffic. Because this actually kind of shows that you're a very straightforward and an honest person. Don't also lock eyes only with one person at the interview panel. This can happen quite a lot because, like if there are 4 people who are interviewing you, about 2 of them sometimes will be the ones who keep nodding, and you're always going to talk to them, the people who don't kind of, make eye contact with you, you don't want to talk. Don't be that, even with people who don't nod to what you say, still maintain eye contact with them, right? Don't think that all that you read on social media or on the internet makes you sound intelligent. Be very careful about repeating quotes or, leadership quotes or like quotes of success in an interview, because it can really come back to, bite you again, because it makes you sound also like you're not unique to kind of keep using quotes that just come up that you've read only on the internet all the time. So be very careful about that and be very wise in using this stuff. Don't ever talk bad about a previous company that you worked for. Unless, of course, there were like, allegations of either sexual harassment or bullying or ethnic harassment and things like that. But even then, an interview is not an opportunity for you to start, start talking bad about what went wrong wherever. Always look forward. There is also, if they ask you a question about why did you leave the previous company that was pretty bad, you can always say that, my time here was such, but now I want to move on. Or you could always say something like, we felt that things were not compatible anymore. But don't start saying that it's a bad company, they're really bad, they have a bad reputation, I hated working there, and things like that. That's really not needed. This is not to say that you should lie, but you don't need to really run down a company that you worked for before. Don't also say that you're ready to do anything. It's a big no-no. Interview panels, the interviewers are going to hold you to it, so don't say that. Another thing, one of my things is that don't start having an accent at interviews and think that it's going to make you look like, it's really, that you're going to seem a lot more attractive or congenial, or it's going to make you be above the rest. It's always better to speak in simple language, even if you mispronounce words, that's okay. Just don't have an accent, because if you can't maintain that accent, the interviewer is confused, everybody in the room is kind of confused. So speak simply, speak in the language that you know, speak in the accent that you know, speak in the dialects. Don't ever volunteer your current salary. If a company or the interview panel kept asking you for your current salary, always just come back to, this is what I expect of you. You don't need to actually give particulars of your previous company salary details. It's in fact not really needed. Another don't in an interview or even in any job is really not to stick to your comfort zone. Always try and move to try out new things. Tell people that you want to take on new roles. And yeah, kind of don't stick to your comfort zone. I'm getting another message that I'm kind of 2 minutes above things. So I'm kind of going into question time. Also mention my email here. If any of you have any questions with regards to this, any other communications topic, please feel free to email me. But Srividya, I'm out of time, so I'm not going to ask for questions. So thank you for your time, everyone, and thanks Srividya for being such a support right throughout, and Vidura and Imesh and the team. Right, thank you.